Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience today. Welcome to the daily briefing. I have a couple updates at the top. I will not lose my place in my book today, and then we'll start with some questions. A quick travel update. Secretary Kerry just arrived in Rome. He will travel tomorrow to Amman, Jordan, to meet with President Abbas to continue to work to narrow the gaps between the parties. He will also be in touch with Prime Minister Netanyahu over the phone or video conference, depending on what technology we need. So we'll be having some more discussions on Middle East peace. Last item at the top, excuse me, on Egypt. Implementation of yesterday's verdict imposing the death penalty on 529 defendants after a two-day trial would be unconscionable. If Egypt's leaders want to ensure a political transition to democracy that ultimately improves the stability and economic prospects of their country and their people, and that's respected by the Egyptian people, they must unequivocally ensure an environment that is free of intimidation or retribution. This includes ensuring due process and fair trials for all Egyptians accused of crimes. The verdicts handed down yesterday by the court and the commencement of another mass trial for 683 individuals today in the same court represent a flagrant disregard for basic standards of justice. The imposition of the death penalty for 529 defendants after a two-day summary proceeding cannot be reconciled with Egypt's obligations under international human rights law, and its implementation of these sentences, as I said, would be unconscionable. We cannot and should not credibly entertain the prospect that a two-day trial resulting in the sentencing of 529 people to death could respect the fair trial safeguards guaranteed by international law. We are making clear to the Egyptian government that these verdicts cannot be allowed to stand. The government of Egypt should be taking action to increase the freedoms of the Egyptian people, not to suppress them, thereby feeding into the exact extremism that undermines peace and security. So today we call on the government of Egypt to refrain from politically motivated detentions, charges, and trials, and to ensure that all in Egypt are afforded the fair trial safeguards they are guaranteed under international law. With that, Laura, kick us off.
Okay, so we'll just pick up on Egypt then. You kept saying that if the verdicts are allowed to stand, it would be unconscionable. Do you expect them
Implementation would be of these verdicts.
Do you expect Egypt to change its stance on this at this point?
We certainly hope they will. I don't have any predictions to make, but we hope they will.
And if they don't, then what will the U.S. do?
Well, as you know, we have been reevaluating since July our relationship with Egypt and our policy towards Egypt. I don't have any predictions to make about what consequences might come from this. As we've said and as I reiterated yesterday, we think it's important to maintain a relationship with Egypt for a variety of security, economic, regional reasons. But at the same time, we will make clear when actions are taken that we do not agree with and that in turn have the result of us changing our policy. So as you know, we are currently evaluating our aid policy, for example, some of the aid we suspended when we made that decision a few months ago. Everything that happens on the ground, including this, will play into the decision about where our assistance relationship goes from here.
And is that decision supposed to be made, I believe, by the end of this month?
I don't know. Let me check on the specific timing. And there could be other repercussions. I don't have anything to preview. Again, we think it's an important relationship, and we believe by engaging with not only the government but also the other parties and groups that that will be helpful in moving their process forward, hopefully. Even when we don't agree, we still think it's important to engage, which is what we're doing right now.
Marie, Egyptian government has considered all these international reactions as intervention in the judicial system in Egypt. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I don't think there's any intervention in their judicial system. I think that's a preposterous allegation. We're not doing anything like intervening in their judicial system, nor do we want to. What we are doing is what we always do everywhere, to speak out for our principles and our values, and indeed international legal principles and values when they are threatened. Hold on, Elise, let me, welcome to the briefing, Elise. And that's what we're doing here. Countries that say you're intervening in our affairs, you're meddling in our affairs, often just don't like what we're saying. We're not. It's up for the people of Egypt to decide their future. That's exactly what we've said all along. This kind of intimidation takes Egypt in the wrong direction. It takes the power out of the hands of the people to choose their future by intimidation, by charges based on political motivations. So it's actually going in the opposite direction than the people of Egypt want. Yes.
Can I just follow up on that
Yeah.
point? I understand that you say that, you know, when you're speaking out about, you know, legal injustice and such. But the fact that you didn't, call the ouster of President Morsi a coup, do you think that, you're sending a mixed message to the Egyptian government that, some things are, acceptable, and they're just kind of testing their limits because, in some cases they've been able to get away with, what some people would consider injustices of the legal system?
Well, I don't, and for a couple of reasons. The first is that just because we made a legal determination that we didn't have to say whether or not it was a coup, we made very clear our incredible disagreement with what they did. The president made a statement, the secretary made statements, and indeed, we suspended some of our assistants based on what they did. So regardless of what words we use, we took action when the Egyptian interim government did things that we did not think were acceptable. So that's why right now, we were just talking when you walked in, that we're looking at all of that assistance. We're evaluating where that relationship goes, and everything that happens on the ground plays into that decision. This obviously will play into that decision. And then I'll go to you.
I know that the figure is really staggering, but your statement is a bit mild. I mean, I tried to look at...
Mild?
Yes.
I said unconscionable like four
No,
times.
But this is, basically, whether this execution is carried out or not, the fact that 529 people were sentenced to death is really an outrageous thing. I tried to look at a precedent in recent history, and I couldn't find any.
What words would you think I would use that would be stronger? Outrageous, shocked, unconscionable, define logic.
Okay, well, I'm not here to sit policy, but I'm saying, what actions are you willing to take? Action that shows your outrage does have teeth, let's say.
Well, I think you've seen our policy does have teeth. Again, I go back to the assistance decision that we made several months ago when we did suspend some crucial assistance that the Egyptian government wants as a direct result of their action. But put that into the bigger context of the relationship. There are things we continue to do with the Egyptian government because they're in our national interest to do them, whether it's work together on counterterrorism in the Sinai, whole host of issues. We make decisions based on our national interest and that uphold our values. That's what we're doing in Egypt. It's a balance. It's a fine line. We feel we're walking that line. But as I said to Laura's first question, that we are reevaluating that relationship every day. We are determining if this assistance will stay suspended, if more will be suspended, if some will be brought back online. And suffice to say, things like this, outrageous, shocking, unconscionable actions that the Egyptian government is taking will, of course, have an impact on that decision.
I'm sorry I missed Lara's first question. I was a bit late.
It's okay.
But it seems that the Apache helicopters, a lot of the aid is back on track. All the stuff
The
is
aid
back
we
on track.
suspended is not. Nothing's changed on that.
Nothing has changed. That remains suspended?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Absolutely, yes. But look, we also, as I said, and I know exactly what you were here for at the beginning, but as I said, we believe this is an important relationship for a couple of reasons, one of which is we think it's easier and more helpful to push the Egyptian government to do better and make better decisions if we are engaged with them. That walking away doesn't get the policy we want, and while it's difficult, and while they may not always do what we want them to do, we believe it's important to remain engaged with them to help push them, that we have more leverage, in fact, by remaining engaged and not walking away.
Do you agree with the Egyptian government that the judicial system is an independent entity in Egypt? That means there is no relation between the government and the courts?
Well, I don't think that I have sort of any political or internal Egyptian analysis to do on how independent the judiciary is. I'm happy to check with our folks and see if there's more to share on that. But suffice to say, we do not believe that these convictions should be implemented. As I said at the top, we believe that if they are, in fact, it would be unconscionable and that it defies logic, all international legal standards to, as I've already said, convict 529 people and today put on trial 683 more for the death penalty. I'm not going to go into an analysis of what the flow chart looks like in the Egyptian interim government. What I'm saying is this should not be implemented.
And they said, too, that the court didn't issue a verdict, but it issued only a decision, and it can be reversed.
Well, then reverse it.
Well, but wait a minute.
Well, no, I don't know what the difference is between decision and verdict. Is there a difference legally?
Are you asking the government to reverse the decision?
As I said, implementation, we are asking them not to implement the decision. We do know there's an appeals process here. We do. What we are saying is they should not implement the decision, that they should give all of these people a free and fair trial in accordance with international legal standards. And what we have said is that any trial of 529 people done over 2 days, much of which was in absentia, in no way could ever comport with international legal
But
standards.
in this country, even if there are many verdicts that a lot of people feel are a travesty of justice and absolutely ridiculous, but I've never seen the government intervene and say, we're not going to implement that decision.
Well, first of all, they're totally apples and oranges here.
Why?
Because, first of all, we operate in accordance with international law in terms of our domestic judicial system, A. And B, have you ever had a case in the United States where 529 people were convicted to death in 2 days? They're just not the same thing.
No, I'm not. But are you saying, clearly that the Egyptian judicial system needs reform, but you can't ask the Egyptians or any government to personally intervene in a court case when it's convenient as opposed to when it's not
I'm
convenient.
not asking, I didn't say anyone specific should intervene, and I'm not saying it's convenient. I'm saying that the world is shocked by these death penalty sentences. I think all of us are, everybody I've spoken to
I'm
is.
not saying
No,
that
no,
they're
but-
not shocking and abhorrent.
Well,
I'm
and that
just
they're
saying,
not, and
though,
that they're not in line with international legal standards. There's no way that 2-day trials of 529 people for the death penalty are in any way comport to the international legal standards, and that they must do that. And if they don't, there will be consequences.
The mere fact that you just said 2 days, 529 convictions, today possibly 600 and so on. Will you go and would you put on record that you consider this to be not only a kangaroo court or a miscarriage of justice, that it is a mockery, as a matter of fact?
That
of the
what was
justice
the last
system?
thing you said?
A mockery of any justice standards. I don't know what kind of standards.
I think, again, I know you walked in a little late. What I said was we cannot and should not credibly entertain the prospect that a 2-day trial resulting in the sentencing of 529 people to death could respect the fair trial safeguards guaranteed by international law. There's just no way. If they think these people are guilty, try them in a free and fair way, end the politicized detentions and the politicized verdicts, and then you can actually give your own people some sort of confidence in their own judicial system. This isn't about the U.S. having confidence in their judicial system. This is about the Egyptian people having confidence in their own judicial system.
Have you brought this up? I'm sorry if you brought this up in the top, but have you spoken to the Egyptian government?
We
yet?
have. We raised this issue. We've raised it several times, but we raised it again today with the government in Egypt at a senior level in Cairo on the ground.
Ambassador?
And we'll continue. I'll check on who it is. I don't have that specifically here. And we'll continue to have discussions.
Have you seen much evidence from the time, from the time of the overtaking, when Morsi was overthrown until now, would you agree that Egypt's government or rule of law has been headed in a direction that the U.S. does not agree with? Have you seen any evidence to the contrary? In other words, what hope are you seeing that this will turn out to be a democratic system?
Well, it's a good question. There have been a number of times, particularly with the politicized detentions of former senior leaders and others, that we've expressed really serious concern about the direction this is heading in Egypt in terms of the Muslim Brotherhood, in terms of a number of things. So there hasn't been a lot of good news in this realm coming out of Egypt since July. That's true. But this isn't the end of the story here. And what we've always said, and I think this is a hopeful sentiment that we have and that we think is possible, is that the Egyptians have a chance to do better. That since July, that July was a turning point for Egypt that gave them a chance in a very tough situation to make some changes and continue on a democratic transition. As we've said, democratic transitions all over the world take generations, decades, years. They don't happen in a few years, and they don't happen over a few months. And we are hopeful that by working with the Egyptian government and the other parties, the international community and others, that we can help get Egypt back on a good path. But there hasn't been a lot of good news.
Has there
There
been
hasn't
any,
been.
Is there any precedent since July, that Egypt, that Cairo has heeded U.S. warnings or, admonitions, or that they should reverse course?
On anything? Or on judicial
well,
issues?
on
or-
judicial issues or government issues or non-democratic movements?
Let me check with our folks and see what their thoughts are on this. It's a hard question to answer because in some ways you don't know, you can't prove a negative, or you can't prove something that could have happened but didn't. We just know what happened. So let me check with our folks and see. I do know that our team on the ground and our team here doesn't think this is, they've somehow crossed into abyss. There's no coming back from this. There's no way to bring them back on the rails in terms of their judicial process. But
They don't think that.
they don't think they've crossed over into some abyss. They do still think there's a chance for Egypt to get back on track, get back on the rails. But look, we've seen, even when Morsi was president, even before July, that yes, someone can be elected democratically. That doesn't always mean they govern democratically, and one election does not a democracy make. So I think that, we're still halfway through, maybe not even through the story of Egypt's transition, and that's why we'll keep working with them on it.
In your discussions with the Egyptians, have you been given any indication that the government itself kind of understands the incredulousness of what happened and that they would be reconsidering it in any way?
I don't know is the answer. Let me check with our folks who've had the conversations, and we can maybe talk about it a little more tomorrow. Let me get a sense from them what they're getting from the Egyptians.
Did the U.S. Embassy confirm this number to be 529? Because there are some press reports, they say less than that.
Okay, I can check. It's my understanding that we think that's the number, but let me check and see if there's any discrepancy.
New
Yes.
topic?
New topic, yes.
Yes, you announced that the secretary will visit Jordan to meet with
Yes.
President Abbas today. And
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, sorry. And this timing is coming immediately after the end of the Arab League summit in Kuwait.
That's true.
What's your expectations from the summit, the Arab summit? Are you expecting the Arab summit to ask President Abbas to continue in the negotiations after the end of next month?
Well, I haven't heard from our team any specific expectations they have from the Arab League summit. Obviously, we've been in close touch with the Arab League throughout this process. They're an important part of the process. I don't know of any specific expectations. I think what the Secretary is doing is continuing to work to narrow the gaps. Obviously, some still exist, and working on a framework. So I think, every meeting he has is probably, you can say, comes after an Arab League meeting or another meeting or somebody being in Washington because he meets with them so frequently. But I think it's just the latest in the discussions. We'll see what comes out of the Arab League meeting, though, if we have more on that.
Do you think that if you don't get this the Israelis don't make this prisoner release on Friday, that efforts at peacemaking will be all but stymied for the foreseeable future? Because President Abbas has said that if this benchmark goes through without the prisoner release, that he'll end the negotiations and go to the United Nations.
Well, a few points. The first is that both parties agreed to negotiate for 9 months. So I think we're still certainly operating under that basis, and they're still negotiating in good faith under that basis. Obviously, we've said both parties have had to make courageous decisions throughout this process to keep the negotiations going, and we certainly hope that will continue. And again, the Secretary is just about to have some more meetings, and we'll see how those go.
What's your understanding of which prisoners are going to be set for release or up for being released at the end of this week?
Let me check. I don't have a breakdown of that.
Okay.
Let me check.
Have you heard Abbas's speech at the summit? Because he said
I
that
haven't.
Israel did not waste any opportunity to scuttle Secretary's efforts. You agree?
Well, both parties are still at
with
the
Abbas?
table. Both parties are still at the table having discussions with each other and with the Secretary and with Ambassador Indyk. So I think the proof is in what's happening.
Do you consider these allegations to be inflammatory or provocative or anything like this? Or
I haven't seen them, so
or not in tandem with what's going on?
Well, I haven't seen them, so I don't want to put a value judgment on them, but I will say that President Abbas has been very committed to this process throughout the whole process.
Okay, and that's to follow up on Elise's question on the issue of the prisoners that are scheduled to be released on the 29th. Now, Abbas time and again insisted that if this does not take place, no negotiations in the future will take place. Are you talking to him on, that perhaps they need more time to release the prisoners and so on?
I'm not going to get into any of the specifics of what we're talking about.
Let me just ask you just a quick follow-up on the Israeli behavior. I mean, we have seen increased incessant violations of Palestinian camps and cities and so on. Today, this morning, as a matter of fact, the Israeli forces went into the Polytechnic University and beat up a guy, arrested them. They beat up a number of professors and so on, unprovoked. We have seen this pattern in the last few days. Are you talking to the Israelis about, sort of scaling back this very aggressive behavior in the last week or so?
I'm not going to get into any of the specifics of discussions we're having with either party. I'm just not going to.
Okay, now just to quickly follow up on the discussion that Mr. Abbas had with Martin Indyk, the American envoy Martin Indyk in Amman. Did he discuss with him, just to follow up on what Lisa, an extension of the talks?
I'm going to say it for a third time. I'm not going to discuss what we discussed specifically with either party. Yes, on peace process?
Yeah, why the U.S. is focused on talking to the Palestinian side only, not to the Israeli side?
what I
We know that President Abbas was in Washington last week. He met with the
And
president and with
Prime
the
Minister
Secretary.
Netanyahu was in
Yeah,
Washington
3
not too
weeks
long
ago.
before.
And this is the second meeting in 2 weeks with Abbas.
And
not
I
with the
also
Palestinians,
said, if
with
you
the
heard my
Israelis.
third line at the top, that Secretary Kerry will also be in touch with Prime Minister Netanyahu over the phone or video conference tomorrow as well.
Why,
Just-
he,
why
he
isn't
will
he
be-
coming to Rome?
He will be meeting with
Amman, excuse
Abbas,
me.
not with the
Well,
Prime
he's
Minister.
having conversations with the Prime Minister. They're not in person, but they're certainly detailed conversations. So he's talking to both sides tomorrow. One happens to be in person. I wouldn't read anything into that. Yes. Yep.
Yemen. It has been reported from Sanaa that a Western diplomat has been abducted. Are you aware of that? And could you tell us whether it's an American diplomat or
Not an American, it's my understanding. I know the facts are still emerging here. I know our folks are following it. And if we have more to share on it, we can. But it's my understanding it's not an American. Yes.
On Afghanistan?
Uh-huh.
Have you seen President Karzai's statement over the weekend on Crimea supporting Russian position on that? Do you have any comment?
I have seen it.
How do you view it?
Well, I think we've been very clear about the fact that we believe Russia, we and the rest of the G7 and the international community, believes that Russia violated Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty with their incursion into Crimea. So I'm not sure exactly what international legal standards that President Karzai is basing that on, but it's just not based in reality, I would say, is probably my only comment about that.
So have you taken up this issue with him? He's
With
one of-
President Karzai?
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge. He doesn't really, I mean, there's not really a reason we would. We're talking to the G7, to the Ukrainians, to the Russians, to everyone who directly is involved in the situation in Ukraine and Afghanistan. It's just not.
And also the top leadership of Afghan government is blaming Pakistan's ISI for the attack on the hotel and several journalists, including that of AFP, were killed. Do you have any readout on that?
Of the attack? Well, I know
Yes.
we've put out statements, obviously, condemning the violence and the attack. I don't have more on responsibility for that. I'm happy to check.
There are some
And then I'll
reports
go
that, sorry,
No, it's
also
okay.
on Ukraine,
Yeah.
that Russia now has 30,000 troops along the border with Ukraine
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, kind of tanks and stuff pointed in the Ukraine's direction. Do you now believe that that President Putin is intent on going into eastern Ukraine and it's just a matter of time, or do you think that this is still a kind of just posturing?
Well, I think what we've said is we're very concerned about what escalatory steps the Russians could take. We're concerned about the troops massing. Secretary Kerry brought it up yesterday with Foreign Minister Lavrov. We're concerned about the Ukrainian soldiers and Marines that are still missing and that Russia needs to return and be held accountable for. So the bottom line is we hope they don't. We hope they don't take further escalatory actions. We hope they pull back. I don't have any predictions in terms of whether they will. I think I probably don't want to look into a crystal ball about what Putin will do. But they should not take additional steps. I think the G7 spoke very clearly yesterday with one voice saying there will be further consequences if Russia continues to escalate.
So are you saying that there are or there aren't troops in the Ukraine, Russian troops?
There are troops amassing on the border with
Amassing
Ukraine,
on
and
the
there are
border.
troops in Crimea, which we consider to be part of Ukraine.
Okay, but,
Yeah.
but you're not saying that there are Russian troops and divisions and tanks and so on that are actually
In
on,
other
on Ukrainian territory?
Well, Crimea is Ukrainian
I mean,
territory.
aside from the
Uh, to my knowledge, they're amassed on the border. I can check and see if there's any. I mean, obviously, we've been concerned not only about troops, but I should say we're concerned about Russia fomenting unrest in parts of southern or eastern Ukraine, particularly ahead of the elections that we think are so important in moving Ukraine forward. So we can focus on tanks and troops, and that's important, but we also need to focus on the broader question of whether Russia's trying to destabilize significant chunks of Ukraine. Yes, I'm going to go to you because yeah.
Josh Bernstein with Al Jazeera. Back in September, we obtained a copy and published the Benghazi report, the findings of the independent panel on best practices. The report was highly critical of security at diplomatic posts and embassies, and it made an immediate suggestion for the need of an undersecretary for diplomatic security. At the time, State Department declined to comment. It's been 7 months. We were hoping you could answer some questions on that.
Let me see if I have at some point in this big book had best practices guidance in here. give me some, I might not have the answers today, but if you want to give me the questions, I'm happy to look into them. I might just not have the answers here, and I want to be very specific when I answer your questions.
Sure. Well, it's our understanding that tomorrow the 5-member panel is scheduled to meet with Undersecretary Heather Higginbotham. And will that meeting be open to the press?
No, it will not be open to the press. We'll attempt to provide a readout for you after the meeting. Wouldn't be unusual for it to be closed.
Is there a reason why these meetings are being held in secret and
Well,
questions
I
won't
wouldn't
be answered?
say in secret. These are discussions that we're having internally. We have talked ad nauseum about Benghazi, the ARB, the congressional investigations, the best practice panel from this podium and elsewhere. So believe me, I don't think there's any part of the Benghazi conversation that hasn't been had publicly. Sometimes there are meetings best done in private, internally, to determine the way forward. I'm not sure why it would be appropriate for it to be a public meeting.
Is this meeting any indication that the State Department is going to take seriously the #1 recommendation of the panel to create a position of Undersecretary for Diplomatic Security?
I don't have any preview for you of what the meeting will be tomorrow. Again, I'm happy to check with the people who are going to be there and be a part of it. Again, I don't have that specific information in front of me. I know that has been out there. There are no, at this time, to my knowledge, any plans, obviously, to create new positions. But we've taken, particularly the ARB's recommendations, very seriously. We've made great progress in implementing many of them on congressional investigations very seriously, and have implemented many of their recommendations as well.
This is nothing new, though. This is something that 14 years ago was recommended and approved by then Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, but ignored, never implemented. Is there a reason why the State Department is reluctant to create this position?
A new position. Let me check specifically on that. I'm sure there's an answer for you, but maybe going to the crux of your question, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the notion that if there was this one different position, or if there had been on September 10th, 2012, this wouldn't have happened. I don't think anybody's arguing, and I think is just not based in the facts about the case. So I'm happy to check about this.
That's not the crux of my question.
Okay, well, what is the crux of your question, and why we haven't put another person in place?
This has been going on for 14 years. This panel that you say you've taken very seriously, I mean, it's page 1, their #1 recommendation. And this was also recommended 14 years ago. Bobby Inman thinks it should take place. And, you know, it's been approved, but, you know, and the panel also says that Undersecretary of Kennedy is overwhelmed and can't handle all these different tasks. What's the State Department's response?
Again, I don't think I have that specific question in here. I'm happy, I know we have an answer to why we haven't done this. I'm happy to take it and get you an answer. If you want to, I can send it to you, you can come back tomorrow. Again, we've taken a sort of top-to-bottom look at security since Benghazi. It's something we're constantly concerned about and reevaluating. What the right bureaucratic mixture is for who should have control over security and what that should look like is something, obviously, since Benghazi, we've taken very seriously. So I'm not trying to downplay your question or the importance of it. I know there's an answer to it. I'm sorry I don't have that specifically in my book. I'm happy to get it for you.
Would you be willing to provide somebody for a sit-down interview with Al Jazeera regarding the report, its findings, and
Well,
the
I'm
panel's...
happy to answer the question from the podium tomorrow, and if it's not good enough, we can talk about how to answer it further.
Thank you.
Deal?
Change topic? Oh, sorry.
Let's go to Elise, and then I'll go to you. But I will get you an answer. I have like 20 pages of Benghazi, and unfortunately don't have that.
I have 2 quick ones. One about Venezuela. Apparently, Congressman Maria Corina Machado was expelled from Congress for coming to the OAS. Do you have anything on that?
Yes, I do. Just give me 1 second. Yes, so she